And then I believe we've gone live, unless this chat tells me otherwise. Okay, so let me first say to the audience, if you're following along and you want to submit a question for these candidates, which will come in the second half of the debate, head to tr.ps/SGA debate. There's a Google form link there where you can submit a question that can be asked to a specific candidate, a specific ticket, or the debate in general. And now the candidates have been made aware of this, but let me explain to the audience as well that we're going to begin with opening statements by ticket. By results of a coin flip, we're going to have the president, VP, and CFO of one ticket go first, each given 60 seconds, and then the president, VP, and CFO of another ticket given 60 seconds each as well. After that, we're going to move into questions from the Elections Commission via myself, and those will be given to a specific ticket, 60 seconds to answer. The opposing ticket will get 60 seconds to respond. The initial ticket will get a further 60 seconds to respond to that, and then the responding ticket will get 60 seconds to wrap it up. So it'll go 60, 60, 60, 60. Then we'll move on to another topic of discussion. If I, as the moderator, feel that the discussion needs further elaboration, if I don't feel that the question has been appropriately answered, I, at my own discretion, can extend time for both tickets to better answer the question. Then at the end, also by coin flip, we'll have closing statements in the same format, 60 seconds for each candidate within the ticket, and then 60 seconds for each candidate from the other ticket. I'm going to go ahead and flip this coin alphabetically. Forward is first, so they will be heads. Impact is second, so they will be tails. I don't know if I can show this on camera, but I'm going to try. So it is heads here, which means forward will be going first. So the presidential candidate for forward, you have 60 seconds as soon as you get unmuted.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for being here at the debate tonight. It really does mean a lot to both Forward and Impact for you to tune in. My name is Dan Alpert. I'm a marketing major. I go by he, him pronouns, and I'm running for student body president with the Forward Maryland campaign. When we were creating this ticket, something that was on the forefront of our minds was to ensure representation of the student body, something that unfortunately SGA has lacked in the past. We wanted to make sure that we were truly representing everyone on this campus. Not only are we statistically representative of this university, but we also reach 150 different student groups. We are student leaders across campus that are coming together to truly make another great year and to bring SGA and the university forward. This past year, I had the opportunity to serve as the student liaison to the City Council, where I represented 30,000 students. And I'm excited to continue to do that next year while serving as student body president. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. We'll move on to the VP now, as soon as you're unmuted.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nabila Presatillon, and I'm a philosophy, politics, and economics major. I go by she, her, hers pronouns, and I'm excited to run for vice president for Forward Maryland. So coming in as a leader in advocacy and event planning, I've been able to observe SGA from an outside perspective. And so what I've seen is that historically, SGA has been predominantly white, and it really lacks in the outreach, especially to underrepresented groups. So for me, what's important coming into the next year as vice president is that we are going to students and communities first. We're asking them, how can we be the best allies to you? And we can see how we can effectively advocate for the UM community as a whole.
Thank you, Nabila. And now on to the CFO.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm Kane Zambelli. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a finance and communications major, and I'm running to be the chief financial officer of Forward Maryland. I've been on the finance committee for the past year, and when I actually applied, I did so 2 months before school started, and the current VP of Finance emailed me back and said, dude, what are you doing? I hope that by the end of this debate, everyone will have a clear idea of what my concrete plans are for improving the SGA process, finance process for all students.
Thank you. And now we'll head over to Impact with their presidential candidate as soon as you are unmuted.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. I wish everyone's family health and safety during these challenging times. I'm Kelly Sherman, and I go by she, her, hers pronouns, and I'm a junior public health major. I'm the presidential candidate for Impact UMD. COVID-19 has displaced Terps in many different ways, whether it be the loss of their jobs and housing or having a loved one contract COVID-19. Students don't feel heard by the administration, and many feel helpless. Now more than ever, students are in need of solutions, and we need to assert that students' financial, mental, and physical well-being are at the forefront of every decision made by the incoming administration. Transparency is not a campaign buzzword over here, and it's essential to breaking barriers between students and SGA by going face-to-face to address issues impacting students' daily lives. I've dedicated myself to student-centered initiatives in SGA, from securing funding for mental health first aid trainings to finding the first ever mental health student advisory board. I'm proud to be running with Impact UMD, a ticket filled with passionate student leaders dedicated to building a UMD we're all proud of.
Thank you, Kelly. We'll now move on to your VP.
Hi, everyone. My name is David Rachman. I'm a junior biochem major, and I go by he, him, his pronouns, and I'm running for vice president with Impact UMD. Kelly, Simran, and I are running on an ambitious platform with a strong record of advocating for the student voice in front of administrators. What I am most excited for this upcoming semester is this window of opportunity that we have as a student body. With the influx of new administrators, we have the opportunity to start new conversations and shape a new normal for what admin-student relationships are like. Personally, all the work that I have done in SJ has been student-driven and student-led, beginning with a memorial bench spearheaded by my constituents in Ellicott community, to subsidized CPR training asked for by CM&S students. I have stayed true to the mission of SGA in an active effort to improve the student experience at UMD. Through our discussions tonight, I hope to answer your questions and share my excitement and passion for what we can accomplish next year.
Thank you, David. And now on to the CFO for Impact.
Hi, my name is Simran Chatera. I go by she, her, hers pronouns, and I'm a sophomore information systems and OMBA double major running to be your chief financial officer with the Impact UMD ticket. The CFO is one of the most visible and outward-facing positions within the SGA, as it requires constant work with student and student groups. And that's what I'm all about. I've spent my entire undergraduate career as a treasurer for Maryland Doom, where I organize fundraisers and analyze how to cut costs. This is why I'm running to change the process from a fresh perspective. I know the rules, and I've spent the last few weeks addressing unclear information in the discretionary guidelines and how we can change the process for it to be clearer and equitable for all student groups. I know what it feels like to be ignored or overlooked. I want to work to bring out each group's unique message, passion, and character by helping them with the finance process. My plan of action to move towards these goals is to help simplify the funding application process, help student groups find other sources of funding, and being transparent by keeping students informed every step of the way. I'm excited to be running with an amazing ticket that is wholeheartedly devoted to students and their experience on campus.
Thank you very much, all of you. We're going to jump right into it because we do not have too much time here. And since Forward had the first opening statements, Impact is going to get the first question. And that is this. And I apologize for looking over here. I have a separate screen for all my questions. As concerns and uncertainty continue to grow from the COVID-19 pandemic, how will your ticket strive to lead a student body that may not return to campus in the coming months?
That is a very valid question and a very real question in our time. As a public health major, I've understood lots of the different ways that COVID has impacted students financially, mentally, and physically. And in the next coming months, it's going to be a challenge. And we are all a lot stronger if we're working together and creating those communities, even if it's through a Zoom call or through different things like online. We have to still be making sure that we're providing resources for students and also just making sure that students feel heard during this time. Not every home is safe, and we need to make sure that people have the proper resources so that they can get the care that they deserve during this very unprecedented time.
Thank you. And now forward to respond.
Yeah, and this is a great question because it's something that we're being asked by a lot of students as well. As we start to see schools like NYU, MIT, Harvard, and other ones start to kind of plan out what a semester online may look like in the fall, it's something that we've been keeping in mind. And the honest answer is that we keep doing what we're doing. We're still here to represent the students, and the students still need someone to be voicing their concerns. And that's what we're going to be doing. One thing I want to quickly do is shout out some of the essential workers that we have on our ticket, like Quentin, like Shania, who's been working in CVS to make sure that, students have the medicine and the resources that they need, and Pauline as well. These are students across campus that are essential workers as well. And it's important that we're here as a resource and helping them as well. As we don't know what's happening in the fall yet, it's important that we have the infrastructure built out, such as telehealth services, and as long with working with the landlords in the city to ensure that there are proper conditions in Old Town and in College Park as a possible stay-at-home order also expands.
Thank you. Now back to Impact for another 60 seconds.
Thank you. And I completely agree. But I would also add that it's not the new normal, right? Returning to the semester isn't going to be easy. It isn't going to be normal, right? We're coming back as a different community. And what we will need to focus on coming next year when we return is making sure that the resources that students need are available to them. So for example, the grading policy that's currently being implemented, should that be continued into next semester? Should be adjusted into next semester? That's just one example of ways that we need to think about how this impacts students when they return. This also goes to housing, to financial aid. To get a pulse or temperature of what is going on campus, we're going to need to be able to reach out to students, and that's what Kelly and I have done best in our years in SGA.
And back to Forward for final thoughts on this.
Yeah, and those are really completely valid points. And I just want to point out, with what Forward is doing, we already have platforms and priorities to address the needs that the students need in the fall. So one thing that I am really passionate about is that we have a first-generation low-income liaison and an undocumented student liaison, especially because with the pandemic, with the coronavirus, these students are disproportionately affected. And so we have, with our plans in the fall, we already have plans and processes to make sure that those people are addressed in the fall. Also, with fees, I think that's a really important thing to address, just because tuition will be different. We're not going to get the same things from the university campus. And so starting this summer, we want to plan to talk to administration and see how affordable UMD can be, given the circumstances we're in.
Thank you very much. We're going to stick with Forward for this next question. It's a similar topic, and that is, how will your ticket take steps to increase access to mental health resources for students on campus, especially in a climate such as the coronavirus?
One thing that we mentioned partly in the last question, but we really want to ensure that we're expanding our telehelp services. This is something that's extremely important, as students aren't going to be able to have the usual access to the help center, the health center and the counseling center that they may need. So expanding those resources are extremely helpful. And we're glad that we're able to have a leader in this community, a part of our ticket. Josh Lang, who's currently leading the help center, and the telehelp that they all do is extremely helpful at providing resources. We also want to be connecting students with sexual misconduct prevention resources so that they can continue to have the resources they need, even if they're not on campus. This all plays into health and wellness, and it's extremely important that we are addressing this.
Thank you very much. Let's head back to Impact for a response.
I love this question. I love mental health on campus, and I love helping students. I think in wakes of coronavirus and everything, we do have to be increasing telehealth, different platforms and different advocacy routes. That's why we've been partnering with different organizations on campus. We actually have an endorsement from an organization called Chat Health, which is an online tech service so you could ask different questions about the coronavirus or just about health in general. And just like expanding telehealth resources is very important. But also, there are some things that we have to consider too. There are lots of out of state students, and even with increased telehealth efforts, they cannot get the therapy they need across state lines. So we have to be making sure that we are making those strides to make sure that we're advocating for those students. Myself, as an out of state student, the counseling center could not help me. And we have to make sure that we are creating concrete referral processes with the counseling center to make sure that all students get the help that they do need at this time.
Thank you. And we'll go back to Forward for some more thoughts on that.
Yeah, and so going off of like students not being able to get access to mental health resources if they're out of state, we also need to address the international students on our campus that have the health plan, the international student health plan. And so that plan doesn't cover mental health and counseling, so off-campus coverage is not covered for them at all. And so what me and Dan are planning to do is we're hoping to advocate to the administration to offer more help to our international students because they do make up a good portion of our campus and making sure that we're addressing the needs of all students.
And Dan, I see your hand is raised. You still have about 20 seconds left.
Yeah, I wanted to add off of that and say that on our ticket, we have two of the most recent international student representatives. And so they've been leading great charges in this field for the past few years. And we're excited to continue to use their leadership and their connection with ISSS to ensure that our international students are getting the services that they need.
Thank you. And back to you, Impact, to wrap this one up.
Important issue on this campus. As the director of health and wellness currently, it is one of my priorities in my current role. And I have had these relationships built with different administrators, whether that's the new counseling center director, whether that's I'm on the search committee for the health center director, and it's taking up so much time, but it's so worth it to make sure students have a health center director that is important. I think it's important to notice that you need student leaders that also have relationships with administrators, and they're likely to bring other student leaders and empower them to bring them to the table and advocate for what they want in terms of mental health or different things, especially international students and especially different students who might be less susceptible to getting the help that they need.
Thank you. And Impact, I'm going to stick with you, but we're going to change gears here. And assuming that we do return to campus in the fall, this remains one of our top issues, and that is parking and transportation. So we want to ask you, Impact, first, what actions will your ticket take to address the continued changes in parking and transportation availability, especially as new construction generally will decrease parking availability?
I'll get on my soapbox about this one. With parking and transportation, it is a complete mess at this university right now. There isn't enough parking. Construction's going in to parking lots. It's not safe to walk through, and it isn't accessible to many students. So I think what the first thing we'll be doing when elected is asking to see that master plan that main admin has, to see what kind of plan they have for parking, because in my work so far in SGA, I haven't seen one. I think what we need to be advocating for is more multi-story lots, because we just don't have room on this campus, and it's going to be expensive. But it's something that students need, and it's something that this campus needs, because we are running out of space, and students need to be able to park, especially all the commuter students and the students that have internships and jobs off campus.
Thank you. Forward, your response to that?
Yeah, this is something that I've been working on for the past 2 years a bit, more so from the fee perspective. For students who may not know, we do pay a shuttle fee, as well as we have the non-mandatory fee for parking spaces as well. And as we continue to advocate for more affordable options on campus, one of the biggest issues that we have is that DOTS treats student fees like a never-ending piggy bank. And that's something I haven't been scared to call out. And I've said it to David Allen as well. And it's something that we need to ensure that when we're talking about shuttle and parking spots and all that, we're also talking about how we're paying for it. And we need to ensure that DOTS is having a sustainable revenue stream that is not just the student money. At the same time, we're going to have a lot more public transportation options coming up soon, especially with the Purple Line. and we need to ensure that our campus is moving in a more sustainable direction. And so instead of adding more parking spaces, we need to ensure that we have accessible options around campus. And, like David said, we do need to improve the sidewalks, and we do need to ensure that our public transportation is up to par.
Thank you very much. Impact, 60 seconds more from you.
I'd also, the fee process is confusing, but I'm glad that our student fee coordinator this year, Madhu, has done this great campaign. What I think is also important and a big aspect of the next semester and really the next couple of years at UMD is the Purple Line. The Purple Line is going to bring changes to how many cars are going to be going through campus, the type of traffic that's coming through. And so currently there has been absolutely no student input on the Purple Line, to my understanding. I've worked closely with the people who are in charge of the Purple Line, but they haven't worked with students. And to address student needs, we're going to need to build a coalition with Carlo's office in main admin to figure out exactly how we can use the Purple Line to help students.
Thank you. And forward, some more thoughts on this?
Yeah, I totally agree. And our work with the administration, the city is extremely important with the Purple Line. I'm glad that I was able to start that position as the student fees coordinator last year and ensure that we're continuing to put it in good hands. You mentioned that students haven't been involved in the process. However, I've been working with the city on the 2030 visioning process, and we've been talking about this a lot. The university is working on a walkability score, which is something that is something that's extremely important to ensure that our city is able to be more accessible and more sustainable. I've been working with Purple Line representatives, with Carlo's office, who I have a great relationship with, to continue to get these updates, and we're happy to share them. But the reality is they haven't been sharing a lot of those updates, and we do need to ensure that they're sharing those more. And as we continue to work in the 2030 visioning process, accessibility along with public transportation is key, and that's really what we'll be continuing to work for.
Thank you very much. Staying on the assumption that we do return to campus in the fall, this next question is for you, Forward. How will your ticket use your positions to improve the safety for students on and around campus?
As the student liaison this year, this is something that I've been working with in terms of our off-campus students. I think safety is an extremely broad term and category. And so one thing that we're working on specifically is creating a city SGA and university and landlord working group to ensure that our students have a direct line of access to our landlords. We have a lot of unsafe and unaffordable housing conditions in Old Town, and it's something we've been continuing to address. Right now, there's essentially a triangle of a good relationship between the city and landlords and students with the city, but not much communication between that. And so by creating that working group, we hope to address some of those safety options as well. We also plan on partnering with our partners in Greek Life to ensure that when there are registered social events, that there's contact information in bathrooms along in hallways to ensure that when students may feel uncomfortable, they know who to call immediately. We want to make sure that we have a safe campus for all, both on and off campus.
Thank you. Impact, 60 seconds to respond.
I think one of the great things about our ticket is just the dynamic amount of people that are on our ticket and proving that they have worked in some capacities towards safety or just different things in the past. Our Greek liaison who wants to improve the overall safety for the Greek community, it's not going to just stop with the Greek community. There are so many lights out in Old Town, and as a woman walking through Old Town at night, I do not feel comfortable. I do not feel safe. And that's something that we really need to improve, especially going forward next year, just to make sure that students are accounted for and students' health is always the priority and their safety. This also ties back into mental health on campus. We need to be making sure that we're working with students to make sure that they have the proper resources for if they're not going to feel safe, then how can we best help them and make sure that they are not in a situation where they would ever feel unsafe in the first place.
Thank you. Back to you, Forward.
So like Dan said, safety is a really broad term, and I want to talk about the safety of minority students on campus. If we're coming back in the fall, a lot of the xenophobic implications of the coronavirus will still be there, especially for our Asian American students. it's really important that we support them and we make sure that we have this, like the effective resources to help them feel safe on this campus. Something that I really love in our diversity and inclusion platform is that we want to do a campus survey in the beginning of like how welcome, how safe students feel. And so that will inform what initiatives we want to do, what type of campaigns, and how we want to make students feel safe. So yeah, safety is a very broad term. It can be with lights, it can be with accessible sidewalks, but it can also be interpersonal safety and how students of color feel on campus.
Thank you very much. Back to Impact.
I think SGA and the SGA that I envision for next year is an SGA that is able to partner with all of these communities that Nabila mentioned and create dialogue. And this year I've really worked hard with different marginalized communities to see how we can improve SGA internally, but also our outreach to these students. In terms of safety and the work that I've done and Kelly has done is ranges from pepper spray policy advocacy to in the Maryland General Assembly to funding a pilot program that actually I applied for and got money for was for more lights at bus stops. A lot of the bus shelters that are on campus aren't well lit, which I think is a ridiculous thing because that is where people huddle. But yet still can't feel safe. And so this pilot program actually installed a solar paneled light, which is very, very bright and only improves safety.
Impact, I'm going to stay with you and we're going to pivot, actually coincidentally a little bit, to Nabila's point. How does your ticket plan to promote diversity and inclusive efforts within our campus community in this climate and just in general? And this question is for Impact.
I'm so sorry. I did not realize I was off mute. I'm so sorry. So our platform, we're trying to increase diversity and just take note of different xenophobic remarks and different things through listening sessions on campus and making sure those students feel safe to voice their own opinion and their own lived experiences during this time, at least in regards to the coronavirus. And the University of Maryland should be a space where everyone feels safe on campus. They shouldn't have to feel that they are in danger as they're walking to class or anything. And it's really important that we have a student government association who can connect different students to resources. And that comes again with outreach. And something that David and I are both proud of are different outreach efforts that we have had to engage with different student groups on campus, not just student groups that are health related or whatever. We really think that it would be very important to make sure that we have this conversation and it doesn't stop at just a conversation.
Forward 60 seconds.
So I just want to say, like, as a woman of color, like, diversity shouldn't be just a buzzword. And so what I'm really proud about with our ticket and our platform is that we have connections with the community and we're reaching out and asking them first, how can we help you? With our informal town halls, with a cultural council where leaders in multicultural orgs will have a direct connection to me and Dan. We have a position for undocumented students where we're able to address the things that they need and it's student advocated. We have something for first generation low income students. And that is all really important. We can't have diversity as an empty promise anymore. And that's what I have seen SGA do. And that's how I feel as an Asian Muslim woman on this campus. We need to do better and we need to be held accountable in this next year.
So I can also relate to Nabila because being an Asian woman on this campus, I felt the same way. Also being a part of a minority group where we have just like felt like we've been ignored both from administration and previously even SGA, where I think our platform has done a great job on trying to include both transparency in this campaign incorporated, but also just equity for cultural. So we wanted to work on kind of cultural fairs, connecting ODI with students, then also strengthening the hate bias response, because obviously I have friends who have personally been affected by just the pandemic and felt that they've been receiving xenophobic phrases. And we want to make sure that we're accounting for that and taking responsibility in how we're addressing this. We also want financial equity in education and pushing for better community relations as well. So we're promoting like minority students attending UMD from local high schools and things as such.
And forward, 60 more seconds.
Yeah, one thing that we're committed to creating as well is a more centralized student-run hate bias task force. When I was a freshman as president of Centerville Hall, this was something that we pushed for, and we were able to pass bills on an RHA level in relation to condemning the hate bias incidents on our campus. At the time, they were targeted at the Jewish community, which is the community I'm part of, and so it's something that I've been working with for the past few years. But we want to create a more centralized student-run hate bias task force. One thing that I also want to point out is one of our affiliates, Alyssa Conway, helped start up what she was calling the See Me UMD campaign. And that was to help ensure that we are really supporting our students, especially our underrepresented students, during this time of pandemic. And so we really want to give her props for that. And lastly, it's fantastic to talk the talk, and I'm glad that we all are. But our tickets walking the walk. And I think Nabila put it perfectly. We have these positions ready to go, and we're ready to ensure that we're supporting all of our students on this campus.
Thank you. And we have a little bit more time than I expected. So let's stick with this topic and dive into some of the specifics between your two tickets. Impact, I'm going to throw it back to you to speak about what you plan to do with your ticket that you believe would be better than the opposing ticket. And then forward, you're going to be doing the same.
I think we're both walking the walk. We have a form already out there to see what we can add to our platform, and we're actively changing it. And you can check our website. We have additions. We've got changes to the existing platforms after feedback. That's what SGA is all about. We can't sit here and assume that we know what 30,000 students are feeling, right? It's not up to one liaison or a task force. It's up to everyone, right? And so I think what we need to do and what we will be doing is making sure that we reach these communities. And I think a key way to reach these communities is through the finance process, actually. This is one of the ways that all communities interact with SGA. And just adding a question of what can we do to improve as SGA on the finance application budget, that's an easy way to get feedback and to see what we're doing wrong and change accordingly.
Thank you very much. Forward, 60 seconds once more.
And so, we are also reaching out to these communities, but we are going in with a philosophy that students can't come to us, but we have to come to them. And so I really don't think that a Google form is the most effective way. And so what I've been doing with Dan and with Kane is we're talking to leaders in multicultural orgs. We talk to Asian American students, we talk to Black students, we talk to Latinx students, and ask them like, hey, this is our platform. What do you need from us? Is this an effective thing to do? Do you want to have a task force for hate bias incidents? Do you want to have a cultural council where we can do some type of cross-cultural solidarity? And so with that, I think that we're taking a step further and we're actually interacting and creating personal connections because we already have, and we're going to keep continuing that from campaigning and into the summer, into the fall.
Thank you for that. And forward, I'm going to stick with you for our next topic here. And that is this. What is your ticket plan to do in order to make Maryland a more sustainable and green school?
Great. So one of the things that one of our members has been working on, one of our affiliates, Quentin, he's been really active with DOTS, and what he's trying to do, what basically what we're trying to do is help increase electric buses, which is something that's extremely important as we continue to move in a sustainable route. I think the other thing that we need to do is really partner with our with our community and with the city, and to ensure that when we get the purple line, that's an access for sustainability rather than just another mode of transportation to have going around. We also want to expand compost throughout the different dorms and buildings on campus. As an RA in Worcester, I have the privilege and the opportunity to help teach my residents how to compost, but we need to be doing more than that and expanding it more. We also want to help eliminate single-use plastics in Stamp and along other convenience stores as well.
Thank you. Impact, your response?
That was a lot on their docket, but I think what the key thing to start with is education, right? Most students, I would say, and me included, when I came into college, composting was completely new to me. And I think educating the students on what composting is, but also what other resources are available on campus and building those up. Big issue that admin has this year is, and really historically, is that they're not able to educate or let students know about the resources that are available. Like the recycling programs during tailgating, most people don't know about those, right? And so I think that is where we need to start, is building the resources that are already there instead of trying to create new ones.
Thank you. Forward, your response?
Forward Maryland has partnered with both with bipartisan action and sponsored by Fossil Free UMD. We've shown clear initiative when it comes to trying to make a more sustainable UMD. Our opposition has come up with the idea of trying to build multi-story parking garages, something that'll work backwards from the idea of a more sustainable UMD. We seek to adopt university-wide LEED, Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design building standards, implement an online green TERPs and sustainable behavior courses for incoming students, promote more sustainable forms of transportation, and advertise and expand recycling and compost practices. Our platform on sustainability is much more fleshed out than our opposition, and we're ready to work for it.
Impact, your final thoughts?
Yes, multi-storied lots aren't ideal, I agree. But what is the alternative, right? The alternatives that have been proposed is cutting down the wetlands and the grasslands that are around campus to form more flat lots, right? That only absorb heat, that get rid of the nature that surrounds our campus. That's not the ideal way either, right? So we have to choose the better of two evils. And I think there are ways to build multi-storied lots in more sustainable ways than traditional ones. And that's kind of what students need to be advocating for. And I think sustainability goes beyond parking or behavior. It goes to students and the way that students commute, for example, right? Promoting carpooling, for example, maybe adding a financial incentive there could really go a long way.
Let's actually stick with this one as well, because it seems we've hit a point where transportation and sustainability are intersecting. So Forward, give us some thoughts on how you want to approach transportation while still being sustainable.
Yeah, and so kind of back to the point of like the financial incentive. So we actually have a program called the Smart Commute Program, and that gives students who are commuting together a little bit of a financial incentive. And so with, I think the point was made about like, instead of like multi-story parking lots, like what is the other options? Like, is that a lesser evil? And the lesser evil is like public transportation with like the Purple Line, with better bus systems, and with the metro. I think that is the best way to help UMD become more sustainable. Like we can't, I think that's like that's really efficient, like including carpooling.
Thank you for that. Impact, your final thoughts?
Okay, so I think, again, we do have to think of alternatives, and we are constantly looking for creative solutions during this time. It shouldn't just be coming from all 40 of us. We have a Google form going out, and it's talking about transparency and how we can improve. If you see something that we're answering and you think it's awful, send us something. We could change this. We want it to be representative of students. Some ideas that people have talked about is working with like WMATA to load on money for student commuters to make sure that they can get in and out safely. Another thing is we have to remember just like the different things about dots and how the buses are guzzling gas. And that's not great. And we have to be making sure we're talking with these student groups and with these advocacy groups to make sure that the final thing is being done instead of just talking the talk.
Thank you very much. So this is going to wrap up our ticket focused questions. We're going to pivot for just a brief moment to candidate specific questions. We'll begin with the CFOs, move on to the VPs and the presidents. As the last question was first asked to forward, this question will first be asked to impact. So Simran, this question is for you, and Kane, you'll be responding. Simran, talk about your knowledge of the funding process and how it can be improved. What would you specifically change or improve?
So some of the things that I wanted to work on was simplifying the funding application process, helping student organizations have contacts quicker to reach out to for other sources of funding, and also keeping transparency with the process. In my experience with now just the finance committee, I've found that the website can be really confusing, and that's something I definitely want to change. In aspects of other sources of funding, I noticed that we oftentimes advertise the funds, which is a really great way, again, of getting money, but also not that many clubs really use that. So I wanted to reach out to creating kind of a way where they could, on the website, see these are off-campus connects that they could reach out to, the percentage they could get, and also point of contacts. In addition to that, also on-campus resources, because there's funding, again, you can get from throwing fundraisers and fundraisers they could throw. On top of that, I think it's important that we go to student groups more, because that was a promise that I've seen made, but personally from being in a student group, I didn't see that.
Thank you very much. Kane, 60 seconds to respond or tell us what you would like to change or improve.
I've spent almost 80 hours at finance deliberations, 50 hours reviewing budgets, and even more talking to clubs directly in office hours. And I'm still not ready to use my opinion in terms of figuring out what's wrong with the finance process. It's an absurd claim to say that any one person can represent the interests of all student groups. That's why I've been going out and actively reaching people, asking them what do they want to see changed. No one can look at the DGs, the discretionary guidelines, the application, and all the finance process alone and say, I think these things are wrong. No, we need to go out to student groups, contact them. That's the reason that I know discretionary guidelines around fundraising, around proof of space, around admissions documents, around that we need more workshops on how to be treasurers, that we need to standardize the DGs better, and that we need to better allocate unspent funds. These are all things that I know because I've actually talked to student groups.
Thank you very much. Simran, another 60 seconds to respond.
So I as well too was actually a part of the student groups. And on top of that, I had been reaching out to student groups and asking them about how they felt. One of the things that I've noticed is that DGs are confusing, which is why I'm working on adding a column to it specifically about examples and things that are just like, that I personally did not understand, because sometimes the financial language is a little confusing to other people. It might be easier for the finance committee to understand, but from that outer perspective that I have, I'd be able to use that to see what I deem kind of confusing. And in addition, I think one thing that was also seen was that office hours didn't run that well. People felt that from an outer perspective, again, not even just my opinion, but this is also me talking to other clubs. They felt that the accountability in SGA lacks, and especially from the finance committee. So I want to make sure that we're more accountable and being more accessible. This means after like every allocation period, I'd want to reach out to clubs and see feedback from them, what they think we can improve, so we can have constituent feedback and constantly improve.
Thank you for that. Kane, final thoughts?
I plan to use my experience on the finance committee, not to figure out what's wrong with the committee and what needs to be reformed, but to figure out how to make the concerns of student groups possible, how to actually fix these solutions. I'm reaching out to students to figure out what's the problems, and I'm working with them to try to figure out what we need to do to get to the end goal and the solution. One of the largest issues right now is actually with something called unallocated funds, which means, or unspent allocated funds, which means that we give the money to student groups, but due to a variety of unfortunate circumstances, it doesn't get spent. Almost $100,000 every year is allocated but unspent. That means that student groups are getting 10% less money than they should be. We need to create a way to fast track this process so that student groups can better be prepared for situations like what's going on with the coronavirus now and be able to spend their money.
Thank you very much, both of you. We're going to move on to the VPs now, and we'll begin with Forward. Nabila, what efforts will you take in your position to make SGA more accessible to the student body?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think the most important thing, and I've said this before, is an effective outreach to minority and underrepresented groups. And that's what we've been doing for the past election season right now. So what we're doing is we're reaching out to these groups, we're talking to their exec boards, and we're asking, what do you all need from us? Like, how can we be a better ally? We really want to make sure that people have that close connection with us, because what I've talked to my friends who are in multicultural orgs or other people of color, they see SGA as just finance, but that's not what we're doing. We're advocates for the community. We're the connection from students to the administration, and we can't effectively do that unless we're in those communities, unless we are helping uplift them with us. And I think that's the only way we can be an effective SGA.
Thank you. David, 60 seconds to respond.
Right. No, I completely agree. And Nabila made earlier comments about how SGA needs to come to students, not expect students to come to them. I completely agree. And actually, this year, we relaunched a program that was then relaunched by Dan Alpert in previous years called What to Fix UMD, right? What to Fix UMD is supposed to be a constituency outreach portal, which is bringing in new student voices, but also an opportunity for SGA members to go out and talk to the community. Now, COVID-19 unfortunately made us all leave campus right when this was about to start. But I will say that, people met this with resistance. And I don't know why, because we are here to represent students. And so coming out to the community, seeing what is there to fix is one great way that I've, and Dan has worked a little bit in the past to start this platform.
Nabila, back to you.
And so WTF UMD was great, but we can't really use it as a platform point. What we need to focus on is intentional outreach and creating the councils and the hate bias task force. I've personally talked to a bunch of multicultural orgs, and yes, I've been met with resistance. But you know what? It's kind of creating those connections. And over time, we have orgs like the Asian American Student Union who have historically stayed neutral, but because they believed in our mission and our desire for advocacy and our persistence, they've decided that Forward Maryland was the best advocate for them and their community. And a lot of other communities who have historically stayed neutral have also supported our mission. And so we want to really make sure we are allies and we're not just giving them a Google form. Me, Dan, and Kane have talked to these communities and we've been asking them, like, what can we fix? And we're going to continue that.
Thank you. David, final thoughts?
I think another way that our ticket has already started addressing this, but will continue to address it, is hosting more events and more. I mean, now that we're all online, it will have to be Instagram lives to just connect with students and put a face. And on top of that, also work closely to improve the finance process because we want finance committee members and the CFO to be at these events so that student groups who do usually see SGA in the finance role can put a name to a face, get answers to their questions, and really build those connections from student groups to SGA finance, to the legislature, and to the executive branch.
Thank you. Now we're going to move on to the presidents and sticking with impact. Kelly, this question is for you first. Name your most prioritized goal if elected president and explain how you wish to accomplish it.
I think my most prioritized goal is establishing advisory councils for each academic college because lots of the schools around campus don't actually have an advisory council. So technically, deans wouldn't be able to get any feedback from their students or anything about their process or how things are running. Additionally, with existing advisory boards, I know I'm a member of an advisory board, they aren't that efficient unless they're managed properly. And we need to make sure that students are there to input ideas and not just be a check mark by a department head to have, a completed student outreach button. That's not good enough. We need to make sure that departments are actually following through, asking initial questions and including us in the conversation right off the bat, instead of just making sure that they meet with us once a semester.
Thank you. Dan, respond to that and also tell us your most prioritized goal.
For me, it's all about how we can enhance and build out coalitions with student leaders across campus. One of the honors I've had recently is being able to serve on the executive board of the Association of Big Ten Students, which is essentially the student government for all Big Ten schools. And we oversee the 500,000 students across the 14 Big Ten schools. And so we want to work more closely with them to ensure that what we're doing is up to par and benchmarking along with them and working with them to create national-wide policy change. We've been talking about this and doing it already. We're working with University of Minnesota and University of Michigan. There are a lot of loopholes within the NCAA policy that allow for Division I athletes, if they are under investigation for sexual misconduct, to easily transfer and keep playing somewhere else. And we want to close those loopholes while ensuring that the process and the integrity of the process is maintained, while also ensuring the safety of our students. And so we want to be leaders in the nation for policy change as well as on campus as well.
Thank you very much. Kelly, 60 more seconds on your goal and also Dan's.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we do help create more validity within different advisory councils, but also within the Office of Student Affairs at the administrative level. Sorry, I can't talk anymore, guys. It's after 6. But we should really create more of an integration in between student affairs and academic affairs, because there is a lot of intersectionality between academic success and mental health. And we need to make sure that that is at the forefront and people actually are being able to have their mental needs met, and then also so they can succeed academically. And Dan, you're right. ABTS does have a lot of potential to be a very great tool to work with different partners across the Big Ten. It's very unfortunate that it's been quiet all year, but I didn't know about that, and that's really cool.
Okay, thank you. Dan, final thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's unfortunate that it seemed like it may have been a quiet year with ABTS. I'm sure Aiden and the rest of the team wouldn't necessarily agree, especially with the HEA Week of Action and some of the other advocacy works we've been doing. We were really excited for a great Big Ten on the Hill, obviously, but due to current circumstances, weren't able to. We want to continue to build out coalitions as well, especially in the academic realm. And so one thing that I know needs to be addressed is creating dean student advisory councils, within different colleges across campus that currently don't. We also want to be able to connect those dean student advisory councils to ensure that we have academic coalitions built across the student body and not just from the administration down. We want to be sure that we're able to leverage the dean student advisory councils to create real academic change across college lines, not just in our own siloed majors and whatnot.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all the candidates so far. We have now gotten through all of the commission's questions, so we're going to pivot to audience questions. If you're following along in the audience and you want to submit a question, the link is ter.ps/SGA debate. We have a lot of questions already, so I can't promise we'll get through them all. And because we have so many, I am going to jump into them right now. That last question first went to Impact, so this one is going to go to Forward first. And it is a ticket-wide question, so whoever wants to jump in first, feel free to do so, and then Impact for your response, same format. Here's the first question. In the past, there has been a disconnect between the leaders that represent the same communities as SGA. What is your position on shared governance, and how do you plan to work effectively with bodies like the Residence Hall Association on issues that are also under their jurisdiction?
As I mentioned, my freshman year, I was the president of the Centerville Hall Council, and so I had a great working relationship with RHA. One thing that we're really proud of is that we have a lot of RHA members on our ticket ourselves, and one thing that we believe strongly in is not stepping on anyone's toes that's in the jurisdiction of someone else. So we want to work together, and I think that the current SGA administration, along with the current RHA and GSG administration, has done a great job of that, especially in relation to fees. The relationship that President Leslie has, along with President Barry, along with GSG, has created a much more streamlined process for the student fees. And I think it's important that we continue to work together in the areas that we coincide, which is like student fees. And when it comes to residence halls, we need to ensure that RHA has the ability to lead and do what they want to do in the residence halls without stepping on their feet. It's about coalition building, and we don't pretend like we can do this by ourselves. And that's why we want to ensure that we're working with our other student leaders to get the work done together.
Thank you. Impact or response?
Shared governance is very important. And I think that goes into just like the team building and atmosphere that we have to create going back to campus when we return in the fall. We're very fortunate to have President Barry as a ticket affiliate on our ticket, just to talk about an RHA light into different SGA issues that we do face right now, and how there has been some disconnect between RHA and SGA in the past. In the past year, Emily and I have met about various different things, from menstrual products to increasing the accessibility within residence halls and how we can make that to a more full scope on campus. It's really important that we do bring the legislators together with the communities for the RHA senators, because we do have a South Campus Commons rep, and we should make sure that RHA senators are actually understanding what's going on with SGA, and SGA should be making sure that they understand what's going on with RHA. And without that like firm communication style, nothing will happen. And I think it's really important that we do have leaders from both sides on our ticket.
Thank you. Forward, back to you. 60 more seconds on shared governance.
Those are all really good points, and I'm glad that Quentin on our ticket, along with some of our other RHA members, have been working on this as well. We really want to ensure that we're working with RHA and Senate and other bodies as well to ensure that we're actually putting out resources in an effective way. We've talked a little bit about education and how the education is not always streamlined and in the same place, and I think this is a great way to do it. And to us, it's also not just working with these three groups, but also with some of the other umbrella groups on campus as well, and the other governing bodies. We also have the opportunity to work with the Interfraternity Council and PHA and MGC and MPHC. These are all great governing councils that we can also be working with to ensure that we're not spreading our resources too thin, and instead working together to create the impacts that we want to see. And when we're able to do that, that's how we know that we're going to continue to move forward.
And Impact, back to you.
So there's been a lot of talk about the campus-wide governance, but also we need to remember that there's smaller organizations that SGA needs to work with. So this year I've spent really working with the other two CMNS representatives to figure out why CMNS doesn't have a Dean's Advisory Council. And what we realize is that the admin aren't willing to work with it because they don't want to form it. And that's where an SGA should come in. That's where SGA should say, we will help build this network and maintain it by having CMNS students not in SGA, for example, sit on the CMNS council, and then have a CMNS representative there to help them out, keep them in the loop on what's going on, but also report back to SGA. This extends past CMNS. There's so many different departments and colleges on campus that just don't care about student input, and that is how we spread through campus, as Dan said, horizontally, not necessarily vertically.
Thank you. Now this next question is also ticket-wide, I am assuming. So we're going to start with Impact on this. What is your style of leadership, and what characteristics of this leadership style will allow you to lead the most successfully in the upcoming year?
My style of leadership is a very collaborative style. I think I thrive best in situations where people are the most passionate about whatever they're doing, and they're not just going through the motions, doing some arbitrary task that's assigned to them, and just making sure that people actually will have the opportunity to put their best foot forward and be proud of their work. And also, if you're more infatuated with your work, you're more likely to complete it and actually get it done on time. Additionally, I think it's really important to have a leader who rules with empathy and understanding what different students and student groups go through, either internally within the organization or externally. I think that if you don't have empathy, especially during this time where everyone needs it most during the coronavirus and everything that's going on, then it's being very dismissive of other students' voices or what they're going through. And that's not really representative and not great for a cooperative workspace.
Forward.
Yeah, and so I guess like with my leadership style, I think what I really like about a ticket is it also addresses these. So Forward Maryland is action-oriented, data-driven, student-centered, and empathy-led. And I think for me and my leadership style, the most important thing for me is making sure that I'm having a personal connection with those around me. I'm really big about empowering students and empowering the other SGA members and the people on my ticket, just because, you know, coming into the university, not really knowing what I wanted to do, I was really able to like be an effective advocate and be a great event planner and leader because of those around me. And so like, yeah, it's really good that people are passionate, but that first step that you need to take is to understand like what people are going through. If they can't attend a meeting because they have to meal prep, that's something that we need to consider. Like there are students on this campus that are food insecure. So we need to make sure that we are leading with empathy before anything else.
Thank you for that. Impact, back to you.
Okay. So for me, working as a team is really important to me, and I'm a big advocate on making sure that our students are also being heard. I want to stress that SGA is an organization that is meant to represent the students, and I think that we want to constantly making sure that we keep our vision in mind, but also keeping students' visions in mind, and just understanding both the people on our ticket, but remaining constantly advocating for students. In addition, in roles like to finance, I want to work on just like making sure that our student organization is and we're working to understand each individual organization, and we're making sure that we're going beyond the expectations. We're really trying to understand how they're feeling, and taking accountability is another thing for me as a leader. You can't do everything alone, but empowering others to make an impact is how I want to lead.
And forward.
What this campus needs right now is to be led with honesty and empathy. Two things that the students have been asking for as we go through this confusing time together. And we don't pretend to sit at this top of this SGA mountaintop and to talk down and to say we know everything. It's about working with students. And so something I've been saying is that, you know, when Forward Maryland gets elected, we're not just going to be working for students, we're working with students. And we want to make sure that that's the way that we're leading throughout this year. We know this firsthand. You know, we're involved across campus. We're involved in different communities, and we're hearing it. As a resident assistant in Worcester, I hear it from my residents. They're involved in different majors and across different places on campus. These aren't things that we're just making up because we're stuck in the SGA silo. We're saying it because we know it, because we're involved across campus. And so we want to lead with students and not just for students.
Thank you. Now, this next question is just for you, Dan. Dan, as last year's City Council liaison, how come the unruly social gathering ordinance is still in place, even though students expressed outward opposition?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer this question. This is something I worked on a lot with our current SGA president, along with the PHA and IFC president as well, since it affected a lot of their constituency. The reality is that it was thrown at us in the first month, and we did what we could. And we did get a lot of concessions from the city council. This was specifically being led by Councilmember John Rigg of District 3, and we worked with him to try to change it. We were really happy with our partners, with Councilmember Rob Day, along with Denise Mitchell, and the reality is unfortunately it didn't pass. What students don't know is that it came up again. It came up again when the city was debating if they should support the state level bill. And at that time, I stood up again for the students and I said, remember the students that sat behind me. Remember those 3,000 names on the signature. Remember why this is unfair and why it's not helpful for students or anyone across the state if this were to be a state level bill, and we got it to fail then, and the city did not take a stance on it. And so it's the small things that we need to realize, but at the end of the day, we did make a lot of room with it, and I'm proud of that.
Thank you very much. This next question is for the presidential candidate. So Kelly, I'm going to come to you first. Being student body president requires holding administrators accountable, but there is also the aspect of having to build relationships with them in order to carry out what SGA advocates for. How do you plan to strike this balance?
Yeah, I think it's very important to go to administrators and talk about what students need and make sure that students are at the center point of their every goal. My first week on the job as Director of Health and Wellness, I emailed the Assistant Vice President of the Student Affairs Office, Warren Kelly, and told him, hey, I ran in SGA elections last year and I said that we were going to get mental health absence days. I want to make it a reality. And we met every single week, just talking about like figuring out the feasibility of different things like that. And I think it's really important that we do reach out to administrators and understand them as a person, just get to know them and really advocate and show them numbers, show them statistics. We led a mental health survey and showed Warren just the different findings from that survey. It's really important that we actually go with facts and personal experience to make sure that administrators understand what a student is going through at all times.
Dan, back to you on striking that balance.
Yeah, I'm glad that we were talking about facts and statistics because it's extremely important. And as my opponent and I both know, what administrators do care about are both the student testimonials, but also the facts. And that's how you drive change. And that's why we're creating a data committee to especially do this. Throughout my past years, I've had a great working relationship with administrators. The Vice President of Financial and Administrative Affairs, Carlo, along with Ann Martins, who works along with him, along with Ken Ullman and other people in that office, we've been working with throughout this year to ensure that when new apartment buildings and construction and infrastructure coming in, it's right and it's affordable, and it's also not gentrifying our community, which is extremely important. I've also had the opportunity to build out a relationship with the Office of Community Engagement because of my work with the census and Good Neighbor Day planning as well. Along with city and local officials as well, between Councilmember Danielle Glaros at the county level, and of course, our mayor here in College Park. But I'm also not scared to stand up for them, just as I've shared when I stood up to David Allen and CRSF.
Thank you. Kelly, back to you.
I think it's really important to have lots of relationships with different administrators, but also I think it's really important to notice the unique ability for advocating to have student voice on different committees and different relationships with administrators. In the past year, the health center director, Dr. McBride, left. And during the new search committee, there wasn't going to be a student voice on that search committee. And during my role, I thought that was awful that was even a thought. And it's something that we have to keep bringing up. And as someone who advocated for a position at the table, I got it. And that doesn't stop there. I want to make sure that we are actually inviting students to these committees. It shouldn't just be SGA in the room. It should be students leading and giving their own personal testimony or bringing the hard, cold facts, whatever they want, because whatever I would bring to the table would be a watered down version of what a constituent wants. And that's who should be in the room as well as the SGA member.
Thank you for that. And 60 more seconds, Dan.
It's a really good point. It is important that we are ensuring that a student voice is in the room and that it's a variety of student voices. We also need to make sure that it's not the same type of student voice. We need to ensure that our underrepresented students also have a voice in the room and ensuring that they have the opportunity to express how something affects them. In addition, one thing that's really important was that when we were doing this 2030 visioning, I was unfortunately the only student in the room. And it was a great honor to be able to represent our 30,000 students as we continue to plan with the city and the university for 2030. But I realized that it's more powerful when other student leaders are in the room. And so I invited some student leaders to come into especially the public safety one and the housing and infrastructure one as well. These are all things that are really important. And I know that a few of us had the opportunity as well to serve on some of the presidential search committee, the subcommittees that unfortunately, as we know, are no longer happening. But I think that we need to continue to advocate for that, but to bring in more students and not just the same type of student either.
Thank you very much. This next question is for the VPs, so Nabila, I'm going to come to you first. As you know, SGA is going through a major structural change where the Vice President will be expected to maintain internal order of SGA. What SGA experience do you have to keep up with the changes and added responsibilities of this new VP position?
So just in regards with my leadership positions outside of SGA, I'm part of student entertainment events, and I'm part of Mary Prairie Juvenile Justice, and I help lead initiatives in those two organizations. I think what's really necessary for this role, if we're considering internal relations inside of SGA, is that we're making sure that people feel heard and that there is checks and balances inside the organization. And so what I've been brainstorming is having like peer evals, which are both upward and downward, just because like as an organization and as students, it's really nice to be able to go to someone and be able to share like, this is what you're doing right and this is what you're doing wrong. And that's the only way we can improve. I don't think having a toxic culture is the most effective for SGA, because then we can't advocate for communities if we're not internally doing things right.
Thank you. David, 60 seconds on that?
Oh, the comment about checks and balances I find quite humorous given that I'm currently going through impeachment. There are checks and balances in SGA, and I appreciate them because that is how our organization should run. Leaders in SGA should be held accountable within SGA and by students. Now, Vice President, it's a weird role. You're right. It's a new one, and I'm not sure. But I think the key there is to realize that everyone in SGA, regardless of what party they're running for, is there for the same reason, and that is to improve the student experience. And the debate is not about whether or not to improve it. The debate is about how to do it. And so I think making the SGA realize, and that's kind of what I've done as speaker, and that is why we've had such a successful year with more bills than any before, with more stances taken, with more student group outreach than ever before this year. It is to realize that our differences are simply about how to do it, and bringing students together through forced social interactions, as anyone in SGA knows, is the way to do it as Vice President.
Thank you. Nabila, back to you for 60 seconds.
Yeah, and so I think it's really important to be self-critical, especially since our ticket admits that SGA hasn't been doing the job. I know Impact also thinks that SGA hasn't been doing their job. And so with the new role as Vice President, I think it's a time for innovation and leadership with someone who is empathetic, who has project management skills so that we're able to have these campaigns through cabinet directors, and that we're able to give the resources to them so they can effectively do their job. And so I think that's the most important thing, making sure that the person who is in the vice president role is personable, is welcome to change, is innovative, because SGA has pretty much stayed static the past couple of years. And so this year, I really want to make sure that we're making those changes and we're actually helping students.
David, back to you.
Right. No, and I agree, but I think I'm just one step ahead, right? I know the admin that students need to be connected to. I've worked with them closely. In fact, this year, we've had more admin presentations through GBMs than, to my knowledge, any year before. We had an administrator ranging from vice presidents to chief of police to directors to professors come almost every single meeting, and just bridge that gap more is what the role of VP should be, is to empower every person in SGA and in our community, because per our bylaws, every student at UMD is a member of SGA, to make sure that change and impact can actually occur.
Thank you for that. This next question is ticket-wide, so we're going to go back to the hand raise function, whoever wants to respond first, and we're going to begin with impact. What are your plans for undocumented students during this time of uncertainty?
I think our goals for undocumented students on campus are to make sure that they're connected with the proper resources because they are disproportionately affected and they're not sure who they can reach out to and who is a safe person to trust. Our diversity and inclusion platform hits it on the mark when we talk about expanding the resources for an undocumented TERPs coordinator and also making that position a permanent position. I think it's great to implement a position, but also if students don't know about it, then they won't actually utilize this as when they return to campus or if they're off campus. We have to fund a permanent undocumented student coordinator, and that's non-negotiable. This shouldn't be a yearly issue. This should be a full-time thing because students need resources and they need an ally in these times.
Thank you. Forward, 60 seconds to respond.
I am so passionate about this issue. And something amazing about SGA is like this past year, they passed a bill to hire a permanent undocumented student coordinator, which is really amazing. And it's like we're taking steps in the right direction. But right now there is a freezing, there's a hire freeze, and what's really needed in this next year is that we have a undocumented student liaison, which is a UMD student that kind of advocates for the issues of undocumented students. I think the administration can give us any of the resources they need, but if it's not checked by students, if it's not advocated by students, then they won't be able to effectively give resources to this community. And so we also have a lot of plans and our priorities, including like educating the campus community and connecting students with mental health resources. And it's really extensive, and we've already laid it out.
Thank you. Impact, back to you.
And I think we did this year do great work. I think for next year, we could also work on funding the DACA extension applications. And that could be the next step forward because yes, we have the hiring freeze and Student Affairs seems to have worked out a contract for this new position, but I think this new position might not be enough. And so I think within SGA, how we've started making structural changes this year is we have the international students representative. And we've worked to expand that position to also include undocumented students so that their voice can be heard in all the work we do, not just as a liaison on the side in the president's office, no, in the legislature, putting the bills forward about the community that needs our help most.
Thank you, and forward. Final thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's extremely important, and that's why we said we have an undocumented student liaison. This isn't a position that we hope to make. We have someone for it, and this student that's involved in it is involved in the undocumented student community. They've been doing this for a while. They took time off of school to devote full-time their effort into this. And so when we say we're going to do it, we don't just mean next year. We mean we're already doing it. We actually have a full white paper on our website in relation to undocumented students on our campus. So this is something that we care a lot about. This isn't just a talking point. It's not just how can we bring in these other things. We have a student who's passionate about this, who is connected with the community. This is what the community needs, and this is what we'll be doing for it. And so part of these plans are to educate the campus community on the challenges of undocumented students, to create a scholarship for undocumented students, to connect undocumented students with campus mental health resources, to prepare local police and administration, and to track local, state, and federal policy regarding it. This is something we care a lot about, and we're glad that we have a student who knows how to lead the charge.
Thank you very much. This next question is for the presidential candidate, so Dan, I'm going to stick with you. As student body president, it is likely that a lot will come up during the year that you did not plan for. How do you plan to keep your current platform at the forefront of conversations next year and carry out campaign promises without completely mandating the legislature's agenda?
The legislature and the executive branch are separate, and I think that needs to stay that way. I think it's part of the reason why our checks and balances are so important. Stepping on the toes of the legislature is not something that I plan on doing. And I'm glad that, when we built this platform, the platform wasn't built based off of, what I wanted, what Nabila wanted, what Kane wanted. It It was built by talking to students and by also talking with our legislative candidates. And so I hope that they continue to bring these issues to the forefront and that they do it in a way that truly brings justice to the students that we're trying to help. In addition, a big thing for us is accountability. We want to be able to publish our platform on our website to ensure and keep it up to ensure that students can hold us accountable. If the Diamondback wants to write an article mid-year and say, you didn't do this, good. Hold us accountable. Tell us we didn't do it. And we want to make sure that we're continuing to move in the right way. If something comes up, we want to make sure that we have the resources to focus on that and continue to do what we planned on doing and promise to the student body.
Thank you very much. Kelly, 60 seconds to respond.
Yeah. So I think it's really important that as the year happens and different things happen and things we can't adjust for, we're still continuing these outreach efforts and talking to students and seeing how their priorities change and how their needs change throughout this time. That is something that we've started doing with students and just having that open communication with different leaders of student clubs or just talking to see how we can best advocate for them without going to them with an email talking about, hey, this is what we want to do. It's no, how can we help you? I'm Kelly Sherman, and how can I help? And also talking about introducing ledge candidates. This just goes into our team atmosphere here at Impact UMD. Our legislative candidates, all of them can attest to this. We wrote our platform. We split up into groups, and whatever you're passionate about and whatever your expertise was in, we made sure that you guys were the ones who were creating the platform. It wasn't just exec laying out the groundwork. It was all of us working as a team.
Thank you very much. Dan, a response?
Yeah, I want to continue off the conversation on if something unexpected happens. And we've seen that. It's going to happen, especially with everything going on right now. Something unexpected may happen. And I think the important thing for us is to ensure that the communication is up to par and is what our students need. One of the biggest complaints right now is that SGA is not communicative really well with the student body. My brother, who goes to Maryland, texted me as well and said SGA needs to promote things better. And we do. It is really true. And so we want to continue our outreach efforts to ensure that our students know what we're doing. Again, through these informal town halls, through talking to students, we're not just putting out another Google form. We want to ensure that we're talking with our students throughout the year and to make sure that they understand how we're going to address the issues that are happening.
Thank you. And Kelly, final thoughts?
Yeah, so I think it's really important that we aren't just putting out another Google form too. We have conversations with students. We talk to them now. And granted, within SGA, that's not enough, but we have student leaders from across the board. It's not just SGA returning to SGA. It's a lot of more people just coming to the table. And I have full faith in every single one of our legislative candidates, our hopefully cabinet, and also my VP. I trust them. I can feel like I can delegate tasks to them and it wouldn't be like, oh my gosh, who's going to control this? It's people understand that things come up and I will always be making sure that I'm focusing to advocate for what students' immediate needs are. Those need to be addressed. We couldn't have planned for COVID, but also we do have to react to the situation that we're given and try to always make sure that students are at the forefront and making sure that everyone is aware that they should be at the forefront.
Thank you. This next question is for you, Kane, and Simran, I'm going to have you respond after the fact. So, Kane, what were the shortcomings of the Finance Committee this year, and how will you make it an effort to resolve those?
One of the largest shortcomings of the Finance Committee this year is that I don't believe we were accessible enough to the broader public as a whole. And I plan to solve this by using appointment-based office hours. From my experience, most clubs tend to come in on the Thursday and Friday of the deadline application period. Our new system under me would have most of the office hours centralized under Thursday and Friday, but also allow for appointment-based hours on the other days of the week. This would allow all club members, executive boards, and all kinds of different organizations to get their one-on-one time with different members of the Finance Committee to ask questions, to put their concerns forward, and to be heard.
Thank you very much. Simran, 60 seconds to respond on the Finance Committee.
So I definitely am very willing to take on this role and learn the roles. I definitely also want to stress that someone who has not been in SGA has seen the kind of things that I've felt that maybe were ignored or overlooked on my aspect. And that's something that I want to work. A Google form can help, honestly, with talking to students because we're able to hear from them and constantly take accountability. I want to also make sure that I'm delegating things properly to the finance committee and to our deputies. I want to collaborate with online chat services like Chat Health and Endorsement We Have to integrate student voices so that helps and is accessible at all times. In addition, again, from the perspective of me, for someone who is on the finance committee for the year, I just was like, I think for you, Kane, it's just we haven't seen the changes that you're saying you want to implement, and I think it's just a little concerning because these are great ideas, but you are part of the committee, and I think it's time for a change and a fresh face.
Kane, your response?
I'm thankful that you pointed out the fact that I'm actually looking for change. And so that's why I want to be CFO. The whole reason I'm running is for change. Committee members on their own don't have the power to make this kind of radical change that Forward Maryland is proposing. We need a CFO who's experienced in the role so that the student body gets the resources that it needs. Let me be clear. To be the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer, it is a full-time job. You are working with administrators, with the student body, with everyone. And you have to know all of the details on day one. I do. The opposition also mentioned that a Google form can help, but we need to do more than that. We need to actually go out to student groups. We need to talk to them and say, how can we best help you? I think that the finance committee needs someone as experienced as myself, not to find out what's wrong with the committee, but to actually implement these changes.
Thank you very much. And Simran, final thoughts?
CFO should be a leader, but not the decider of decisions. And the committee should be working together. And as a CFO, I would ensure that all ideas from the committee as a member can be implemented. And again, I want to stress that we shouldn't undermine the competence of someone who is not involved in SGA because this is an organization that is meant to serve the students. I was a part of the students that felt like they were overlooked. In addition to that, I also know that I've been working at my best to reach out to students and see how they felt. And that's something I've been doing throughout the year, regardless of my correspondence to SGA, because I hear from friends. I've heard from from our endorsements, from even people who aren't affiliated with the SGA election campaign, people who I'm not even trying to get their endorsements from, and said that they were abstaining, but they wanted to just have their voice heard. I think that we should make this experience of applying for funding and work on improving the process. And we're doing that by listening to people in both informal and formal settings. Their opinions about the finance platform needs to be heard, and we need to be working as best as we can to do that.
Thank you very much. This next question is ticket-wide, so I'm going to stick with impact for a response. How do you plan to help the student body transition out of the scary, unprecedented, and at times traumatic period of social isolation and COVID-19?
I agree. And the whole social isolation has personally affected my mental health, and I'm sure a lot of other students' mental health. And so I think that's what needs to be on the forefront of what we're thinking. Lately in SGA, we've been working more internally and not focusing on what's important to students. We haven't had an opportunity to think about what can we do for students? What can we do with the counseling center right now to make sure that we're working for students and not just being in petty political fights.
Thank you. On to Forward for a response.
And I just want to say that, in these scary times, it's not just mental health. And, I think, mental health is really extremely important. Currently, I'm getting help from the counseling center through teletherapy, and I really want to expand that. But it's also really important for people who may feel unsafe at home. Since we have transitioned to online school, some people have lost their security in food and housing. And so that's why it's really important that we have these task force, that we have the cultural councils, because, if we don't go back to school in the fall, we're going to have different issues. It's not going to be a lot of event planning. It's not going to be a lot of cross-cultural events. It's going to be about how can we support the students who are affected by like are affected.
We might have lost Nabila there. Dan, I see your hands raised if you want to finish up those last 10 seconds or so.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Dan. I'll follow up in the 60 seconds afterwards.
Impact, back to you then.
Yeah. As an out-of-state student, I can't reap the benefits that the counseling center is currently providing. And I think that is an awful thing, but I also do understand that that is beyond the counseling center at UMD. We have to partner with other counseling centers across state lines to make sure that students are getting the help they need, whether that's within the Big Ten or within different states. We need to be making sure that all of our students are accounted for during this time, even if we don't transition back to school. And finding different telehealth partners within highly populated states would be amazing for mental health and just helping people with therapy. But also, we need to start thinking of more creative ways to get people in the room together and talking about just different virtual therapy groups to get people to collaborate and talk about different issues that they might be facing during this time. We need social presence in this time to make us feel more at home and more normal.
Very much. And forward, final thoughts on this?
One of the important things to us, and we're glad that one of our ticket members worked on this past year, is expanding the crisis fund as well. The Student Crisis Fund allocates thousands of dollars to students that are in need. And as students come back to campus, they're going to be bearing the burden of more costs again, as they may not have had as they were home. And so we need to ensure that students who may have been out of work for a while have the resources that they need. I work on campus as well. And when the whole pandemic happened, I work in a research lab. You can't do that online. And so, my source of funding also got cut. And I know there are students who are working to pay for college, who are working to pay for their housing. And we need to ensure that they not only have the general resources across campus to support them, but also the financial resources as well. And so we're prepared to continue to do that. We're thankful for Hunter on our ticket for helping ensure that we allocated more money from SGA to the Student Crisis Fund.
Thank you for that. And this next question is also ticket-wide, so I'm going to come back to you forward. Throughout the year, numerous complaints have been raised about the ethics committee and ethics process. Do you think that the process has been sufficient, and what will your ticket do to make SGA a more safe and honest environment?
One thing that we do need is especially for more transparency with the ethics process. I think that this is something that a lot of students have complaints about. I think at the same time, we need to ensure that the process is kept to some extent closed because of the nature of the content that's discussed in ethics. Ethics is for those who may not know, ethics is how we handle our internal cases within SGA. And so for an internal matter, we want to ensure that we're protecting our students that may be accused and also the ones that are the complainants as well. I think that reform is definitely there to be made, and I'm glad that one of our ticket affiliates, David Polifone, has a lot of ideals for this, whether that's creating an ombudsman position or creating another way to resolve conflict within SGA. The other issue is that not all issues need to be ethics complaints. And that's what David Polifone's really hoping to work on in this upcoming year. And we're excited to see those reforms be made.
Thank you very much. Impact, 60 seconds on the ethics process.
As chair of the ethics committee this year, I completely agree, and I've worked with David Polifone closely since he is the vice chair. I think it is important to make sure that it is confidential to respect the students who are serving in SGA. For example, the impeachment proceeding, which should have gone through ethics, was blown out of proportion in a public display with multiple DBK articles. And now my leadership position has been compromised because of this. And so making sure that it is equitable, easily accessible to all, and making sure that there's multiple avenues to go about ethics complaints, but also making sure that we do respect the privacy of these matters. And lastly, I would say ethics should not be on the forefront of everyone's mind. Right? It is this childhood fascination which has led to ethics being blown out of proportion. In my past, in the 2 years before, I didn't even know ethics existed because we need to work for students, not for ourselves.
Forward, back to you on this.
I agree. I think this is something that our tickets do agree upon. I think the one place where we differ a little bit is the need for transparency. And as as someone as part of the university student judiciary and handles some of our more large scale cases, I understand the importance of confidentiality to protect our students and especially those in SGA. I also agree that this shouldn't be, the big topic of conversation right now. Ethics does need to be reformed, and I think that's something that Nabila and along with the speaker next year can continue to work on. I think we need to continue to talk about the issues that are worrisome to the greater campus community, because the honest response is that a student who is not involved in SGA does not even know ethics exists. And so we do need to reform it because there are reforms from the internal side of SGA, like Nabila has mentioned before. But at the end of the day, let's get back to talking about the things that the greater campus community cares about.
And Impact, back to you on this.
Okay, so something just within the ethics committee that I think SGA needs to start thinking about is how are these proceedings happening? We never had a training about what's happening in ethics, and I think it's really frustrating as someone who's in SGA to not know what's happening and just to trust the process. I think these changes need to be made through CBL and through making sure we are actually making legislative changes and making sure that we have an actual lawyer in the room, or if that's not happening during CBL, that should be happening during ethics to make sure that these claims would be held up in a court of law and making sure that all of these claims are necessary. I think during this time and just in general, ethics should not be at the forefront of people's minds. If that is where their priorities lie, then that says a lot more about them than what should really be happening. People should be here for the students, not for internal troubles within SGA.
Thank you very much. This next question is for Impact, and it is ticket-wide, although I have a feeling I know who it's meant for. How has your background in health and wellness prepared you to manage the climate when we return to school?
Well, actually, David and I met in the Health and Wellness Committee, so it could be for either of us, Dan. But as the Director of Health and Wellness, I have loved every single opportunity that I've had from this position. And I think this puts a really unique lens in this time period right now. We have to make sure that from a public health lens that we can create a society when we come back to campus where students understand the importance of washing your hands, even if it seems elementary, and just different basic practices to make sure that students' health is always prioritized, whether that's alleviating different mold within dorms or different things like that. Health is an issue that impacts every single aspect of your daily life. And having someone who is equipped to handle different scenarios, whether it's about mental health or dining concerns, we need to make sure that that is more integrated into the daily life of a student and make sure that they are knowledgeable about different resources on campus that they can use instead of spending money to go elsewhere.
Thank you very much, and I apologize for the assumption. Forward, 60 seconds to respond on health and wellness.
Yeah, I know we've talked about it a few times tonight, but I think it's one of the most important issues that we are addressing, so I'm glad that we are. Part of the issue also is that when we talk about health and wellness, it's also not just mental health. We also need to talk about financial health as well. And so that's something that we want to continue to address on our campus. One thing that we're proud of is that we come from a diverse range of backgrounds and majors and areas of interest on campus. And so we're not just siloed into this one sphere, that this is the only way to address things on campus. And that's really what we'll be trying to do. I also do want to just take the time just to respond to one thing that was said before in regards to a lawyer in the room. USJ and other committees got lawyers out of the room because it's the wrong burden of proof that we're dealing with. So I did want to address that as well.
Thank you very much. Back to Impact on health and wellness.
First off, let's move past the lawyers, let's move past the ethics, and let's talk about mental health and the other questions coming from students. So with mental health, as Kelly mentioned, ever since my freshman year, I was on the Health and Wellness Committee, and that is kind of what drove me into SGA in the first place. I'm a CMNS student, I'm pre-med, not anything to do with politics or law. And so the mental health and just health in general, as Dan mentioned, it spans way beyond just the counseling center or just the health center, right? This year, we've been working to connect academic affairs and student affairs more. When I was in a meeting with the provost and asked, what are we doing about students' health? She goes, oh, that's a student affairs issue. That's not the answer that we should be hearing from our provost. So now we've worked with student affairs to create a dean of students, and that position, which is still being formed, that is our opportunity to really make sure that this whole campus is worrying and thinking and processing health of students in whatever health may be.
Thank you. And forward, final thoughts on health and wellness.
I totally agree. I think with like mental health and wellness, it's important to address it, especially during these trying times. But I just want to point out how limited the view is on my opponent's side. I know like out of state mental health is an issue, but why aren't we talking about international students? Why aren't we talking about first generation low income students? Like we don't have a plan, or like SGA and the counseling center right now doesn't have a plan for generational trauma. We don't have any resources for undocumented students. And I think it's important to have specific plans to implement it for first generation low income, for undocumented students. You know, it's not just out-of-state students that need mental health resources. It's everyone. It's those marginalized communities that keep being ignored and that keep being pushed out of the conversation, and I cannot let that happen.
Thank you very much. This next question is for you, Simran. You have never once served on the finance committee. It's uncertain whether you've ever actually attended a finance training. Given how much institutional knowledge and work this position of CFO requires, why do you think you're more qualified for this position than someone who has served on this committee for a year?
Again, so one thing I really want to stress is I'm very willing to take on the CFO. I know what I'm getting into. I know I have a clear schedule, so I'd be able to devote my time. I'm willing to learn the rules. In addition, coming from that, I do have the outer experience of someone who has helped apply for a budget. And I have felt the frustration that many students have felt. I think that would allow me to be able to voice for them and advocate for them. In addition, obviously I wasn't a part of the finance committee, but I think that's good because I bring a fresh perspective and I'm able to actually enact the changes that I want to make claims to, because I know what it's like to feel overlooked and feel ignored. And I think it's important because, again, we have, obviously, Kane, I think you've done a great job in the finance committee, and I don't want to ever overstep your works because I know you guys have put in a lot of time and effort. I think it's just important that we work to get these resolutions and these ideas actually implemented, which your ideas are amazing, but they weren't implemented this year.
And Kane, this question references you as well, so I'm going to give you 60 seconds to respond.
So the position of CFO, my opponent mentioned that she's willing to take on the risk of learning, but it doesn't begin in a couple of months. It begins as soon as she is elected. As soon as the CFO is set in stone, that's when the job begins. You have to hit the ground running, and you have to know exactly what you're doing. I remember one of the saddest things I've ever seen in the finance committee is when I helped a new group, Terrapin Bowling, complete their first budget. And it took almost an hour in office hours, and we were both really excited at the end of it. And I remember that a little bit later when it came up in committee, it was rejected. It's a clear indication of the fact that the amount of opinion that goes into the finance process is ludicrous. And coming from the perspective of someone who's inside the finance committee, I've seen just how bad it is, and I'm here to use my committee experience to implement the student ideas, to fix these problems. My experience is not to tell people what they should and should not do, but to actually make these solutions happen.
Thank you very much, Simran. 60 more seconds to hash this out.
Again, I agree. The DGs are a really long and complicated thing to understand, which is why I'm focusing on reforming that and making it more understandable by including examples possibly in the columns, because I think that's something that would clear up a lot of confusion. And I'm eager to learn and I'm willing to work. And if we don't start adding new voices, then how can we truly expect change in the future? I've had the experience of applying for budgets, been denied, gone to office hours with my group, and seen no one present. We've waited for an hour, or like around 30 minutes to an hour one time to get help, and then constantly going back. I just feel that a lot of the confusion that stems from student groups can be fixed if we add a fresh voice and someone who is willing to implement these changes.
Something that your ticket doesn't actually address, but I do with my appointment-based office hours. And to actually figure out a lot of these things that are wrong and to work with student groups, you do have to have a good amount of prior knowledge. Look, I can tell you that there are pieces of the finance committee that aren't actually listed on the DGs, and I've been working and advocating in the committee to try to get them in there. The SORC financial handbook under the contractual services guidelines, which isn't even on the DGs, and there's no link to it, which doesn't make any sense, exemplifies that you need the sponsorship of the SEE in order to do a contractual service of greater than $5,000. Do I think a student group needs to know that? Do I think a student group needs to dig that deep to find something that crazy? No. And from my experience on the finance committee, I'm willing to reach out to clubs to go into the specifics so they don't have to implement their ideas.
Thank you very much. This next question is ticket-wide, and forward it's coming to you first. With new directors at the Counseling Center and University Health Center, how do you plan on taking advantage of new leadership to push forward on initiatives to improve mental health resources on campus?
I think that it's extremely important that those relationships are built early. We also have a new president coming in, and we also have a fairly new VP of Student Affairs as well. So building those relationships off the bat to ensure that we can continue the work together is vital for the work that we're going to do throughout the year. In terms of mental health resources, I'm glad that I have a good relationship with Warren Kelly, and I'm happy that we'll continue to be working together to ensure that those resources are implemented. I also want to make sure that our new directors bring in their experience from their previous jobs to bring new ideas to campus. We need those new ideas to ensure that we're really representing our students and helping them out in a place that they need help.
Sorry, I realized I was muted there, but 60 seconds to impact.
Yeah, I completely understand that throughout this tumultuous time and all these changes within admin, we need to make sure that we have these relationships. And as someone who has a relationship with the director of the counseling center and is on the search committee for the new University Health Center director, I can assure you that these relationships will continue, and they will continue far beyond myself. For the director of the counseling center, my first day meeting with him, he emailed me to meet up and just talk about different student organizations that he can get involved, and just making sure that we do have those connections to other student groups and empowering them to meet with these directors and administrators. With the counseling center in particular, I was one of the founding members of the Mental Health Student Advisory Board, which was created in wake of a counseling center initiative for the Wide Awake Therapy Group. This is another initiative that just shows that it's important to stand up to these administrators and always put students' health first.
Thank you. Forward 60 more seconds on this.
Yeah, and I think in terms of advocacy, it's really important to bring up the issues that are important to students first. And so that starts off with changing insurance policies for international students. It includes better counseling for sexual assault survivors who have not had a great trauma-informed experiences at the counseling center. And it's also the mental health of the Black and Brown students who are disproportionately affected by this coronavirus pandemic and who are institutionally not given the help they are needed. And so, you know, as a ticket, as Ford, Maryland, we're going to create these connections with administrations, but we're also going to put forth voices that have been underrepresented, that have been marginalized, and we're going to be effective advocates, and we're going to be allies when we're going through this hard time.
I did it again. Impact. Final thoughts on this.
Communities to the table to hear their perspective, not the mainstream what is mental health on campus, to hear how each community works with this in their own unique way. Also, I think, this window of opportunity that I referred to earlier, yes, we have a new president, but we as a ticket have more members and affiliates has already expressed interest in meeting with us to see the live stream. That was a very contentious topic this year. And so
it's going to be mostly outreach and making feel comfortable in the organization. If people aren't feeling comfortable with a certain person, they should not return to the organization.
60 seconds to respond to that.
This just goes to show that this whole impeachment thing has been a complete smear campaign by the Forward Maryland ticket. I have worked with every single representative on any issue that they feel that they need to progress for students. I have given all my time to make sure that we are representing students in the right way. I don't know this whole talk about the Google form. When you go on Forward Maryland's website, that's the first thing that pops up, right? That is, in the 21st century, the best way to reach it. But I think in our platform, what we're going to be doing is to make sure that all the legislation that goes through our legislature has student group backing. Like all my initiatives with the CPR, it had over 10 sponsors, if I remember correctly, that are also interested in this. And that is what we need to make sure that we're moving towards, so that student groups know what we're doing, have input in the process, and also can feel heard.
And Forward, final thoughts on our final question.
Yeah, I'd like to point out that the current speakers continued basically ignoring the fact that he's under impeachment and blaming it on Ford is horribly disgusting. This is a current matter of this year and has nothing to do with the election and has nothing to do with the ticket. The reality is that in order to be impeached, you have to lose the respect of the majority of the legislature, and that's unfortunately what happened. And what we need to continue to talk about is the fact that we need to be there for the students. To say a Google form is the best way to do it, I know we're kind of going back and forth, but it's not. It's going and talking to these students. It's what Kane has been doing for the past few days. Kane is going to student groups and not just saying, can I get your endorsement? He's saying, can I get your treasurer's contact info? And that's what's important. It's about working with our students, and it's not working against our students. And that's what we need to keep doing this year.
All right, thank you. And with that, we're going to move into closing statements. So a quick reminder on how this will work. In a moment, I'm going to flip a coin once again. Heads being Forward and tails being Impact. Whoever comes up will be going first for closing statements. CFO, VP, and then President, 1 minute each. So let's first find out who's going first. And it is once again heads. So we're going to begin with Forward. So that means you, Kane, will start us off here.
Thank you. Overall, the opposition has brought up a lot of good points about health and wellness, which I agree with, but they consistently ignore the other issues that have been brought up. They have a sustainability platform that makes matters worse and only will seek to pollute the environment, and doesn't even talk about the fact that we need to use public transportation to solve issues. They have a vice president who's not only the chair of the ethics board and is consistently telling people to ignore ethics, but he's also under impeachment investigation. They have a ticket that doesn't statistically represent the student body and a CFO who doesn't have the proper experience to do the job. Forward Maryland is the only way that we can all move forward together.
Thank you very much. Nabila, 60 seconds.
I just want to reiterate why I'm so proud of this ticket, why I'm so proud of Forward Maryland, and it's because we have the right people. We have really passionate individuals who will keep fighting the good fight with or without. So what we're trying to do is make sure that SGA is having these voices at the table. We're trying to make sure we're reaching out to organizations. You know, I reached out to a lot, and they've been talking about how there's this mistrust with SGA because they've never been approached. And so I think it's important that, like, with the new role of vice president, we need someone who is innovative, we need someone who's empathetic, and we need someone who really is in tune with campus concerns. And so I'm really excited to run. I'm really excited for students to voice their opinion and to continue with talking to individuals, talking about how they're dealing with the coronavirus epidemic and how we can improve the campus.
Thank you for that. And Dan, the last 60 seconds from Forward.
This whole campaign and this whole Forward Maryland movement is so important to me, and it makes me so happy because when we put together this ticket, we're bringing people in from across campus, from over 150 different organizations. We have over 50 student groups endorsing us. This shows that students genuinely are excited for the work that we're going to bring. And we don't just talk the talk, we walk the walk. And you see that with each and every one of our members. When I see them talking to their friends, when I see them hyping each other up, that's what makes me excited. That's what makes me happy about this ticket. We're running a ticket that's ready to bring in new and fresh ideas to SGA while continuing to build off the relationships that we already have in our individual communities and the leadership that we have in our own individual communities. We're going to continue to make Maryland move forward. And that's why I'm so happy with this campaign. And so I urge you all to go to forwardmaryland.com, view our platform, view our white papers, see why we're different, and vote for us on Wednesday. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we'll head over to Impact for their closing statements. We'll begin with Simran.
So I just want to thank you all for your time tonight. I'm confident I will succeed as the VP of Finance because I'm ready and willing to put in the time for the student body. I've been through the finance process and I know it can be improved. I'm ready to hit the ground running, and I'm not intimidated by the suggestion that I'm not prepared. What I bring to the table is not just an outsider perspective, but also qualifications, plans, and the dedication to do this job in the way our students deserve. The opposition seems to think that students cannot come into SGA and learn. This is false. Students should feel welcome and encouraged to get involved and have a say in their student experience. And I'm excited at the chance to impact our student government and to help students share in these accomplishments. Enacting change depends on change, and I hope to play that role. I want to provide a face that is approachable to students, that will reach out to your student group, which I've already been doing, instead of waiting for them to reach out to me. Together, we can walk into this next administration with an understanding of the way things should be done. The relationship between students and SGA should not be limited to the funding process. I want to offer you more than an ongoing interaction. I want to offer a support system to aid your student group throughout the entire year. I hope you will vote impact to the student body next year and make positive changes together. Thank you.
Thank you. David, 60 seconds.
My track record in SGA, not only on the legislature, but in the relationships I've built with students and administrators, are all aspects of my college career that I am proud of. All the work that I've done in SGA has been student-driven and student-led. That doesn't end here. As I previously stated, we are running on an ambitious platform with a strong record of advocating for the student voice, something that we have not only talked about, but acted upon. I would like to emphasize the upcoming opportunities we have with forming a new dynamic around the relationship that students have with admin. With my role as sole VP and new administrators coming in, including our university president, Dr. Pines, students should not only feel that we are advocating for them, but they have the resources to advocate for themselves. From addressing the educational inequities that negatively impact minority students to pushing for the expansion of mental health resources and streamlining of the student funding process, it is time for students to be put at the center of the conversation. So make sure to vote impact.
Thank you. And Kelly, 60 seconds.
My time as a student, as a part of the Maryland community, has allowed me to see where we can better address student concerns and put them first. As a community, we've seen and are still seeing threats to student health, financial security, and emotional well-being. Our students are in need of tangible solutions that will make the largest impact on their daily lives, both on and off of the campus. No TERP should feel unwelcomed or unsupported, and as president, I will ensure that each and every TERP has the foundation for the resources necessary to reach their fullest potential. Student-centered initiatives have been at the forefront of what I have advocated for, and I continue to do so. The health, security, and prosperity of our students have been central to my passions and Impact's platform. They're not just words, they are values as a community we should live for and fight for every single day. I'll be a president who won't just talk. I'll continue to stand up for marginalized communities across campus, and if you give me the honor to serve you, you won't regret it. I am proud to be running with Impact UMD as we are a ticket filled with passionate student leaders and activists who want to build bold ideas into tangible results and have the biggest impact on our student body. Please go to impactumd.com, read our comprehensive platform, and will you join our movement to vote Impact on April 22nd to the 24th?
Thank you, Kelly, and thank you to all of the candidates who came out and participated in this. I realize it took a lot of flexibility to make this happen. I want to thank the ticket chairs for coordinating with the commission to make sure this went as smoothly as possible. Also, thank you to Grace and Ashley and Jinwook for coordinating all the behind the scenes. And thank you to the audience for tuning in and submitting these questions to get the second half of the debate as lively as it was. I want to remind the audience and the candidates, although I'm sure the candidates know, that voting will begin in just under 36 hours, Wednesday at 8 a.m. And we'll be voting through Friday until 4 p.m. So not a lot of time left to campaign and not a lot of time to vote. So make sure that you vote when you get the chance and vote for whichever candidate, whichever ticket you feel is best for next year. That's it from me, and that's it from all of us here at SGA. I don't know what happens next, but we're just gonna wave to each other and hopefully the live stream stops soon.